Labas rytas, 10 valanda, mėly.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 10 sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, guests of the conference, members of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, students, it's a pleasure to welcome you at our event. I see that the recording of the event has already started, and I congratulate you already on the 10th International Scientific Practical Conference on Changes in Public Governance, Sustainable Public Sector in Times of Uncertainty. And there is no doubt that we have in a very difficult complex, we have just lived through changes of one kind, and now it seems that we are living in some science fiction story. We have to adapt to new habits of life, especially when it comes to the public sector. The public sector has to adapt to the needs of our citizens. In the radio interview today, we talked about the role of the public sector, and I believe that the role of the public sector is to ensure good quality of life for the population, for ensuring sustainability and continuity of the functions, and to adapt, which means that we have to look at the skills and capabilities of the public sector. We also have to ensure that we have the necessary organizational structures in place, that we know what functions they have to fulfill. So these are the things that we are going to discuss. My name is Andrius Stasiukynas. My colleague, Dr. Alvydas Šakočius, and I are going to co-moderate this plenary session. Now, when it comes to the event itself, the conference is made of two sessions. During the first session, we are going to hear two keynote speeches, which will be followed by the debate of experts and practitioners, both at national and international level. We're going to listen to the insights of researchers. Later, we'll have a break. During the coffee break, we're going to have the coffee break at the time that has been set for the break. Then the sessions will split into three sections, into three panels. Panel A, called Public Sector Modernization, Sustainable Solutions and Good Practices, are aimed at introducing international experience. Well, unfortunately, I have to take note that not all the Ukrainian speakers will be able to join the panel because of the events that are unfolding in their country. But we will have the texts compiled in booklets, and you will be able to look at those. Panel B will be held in a different room, and researchers will speak about the insights related to the times of uncertainty. I would invite the keynote speakers of section B of panel B to come a bit earlier so that their presentations and PowerPoint presentations could be uploaded on the computer. I would also encourage the audience to put forward questions via the Slido program. So you can put forward the questions for the keynote speakers through this program. And I'll now say a few words about the organizers of this event. As usually, this event is organized by the Faculty of Public Governance and Business of Mykolas Romeris University, General Jonas Žemaitis Military Academy, Excellence Network of Public Governance. I would also like to express my gratitude to the Office of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania for co-organizing this event, as well as the staff of the Committee on the State Administration and local authorities of the Lithuanian Parliament, who contributed greatly to the organization of this conference. Now let me give the floor to the Chair of the Committee on State Administration and Local Authorities, Ričardas Juška.
Labadiena, gerbiami konferencijos dalyviai.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, our listeners online. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone to the 10th International Scientific Practical Conference on Public Governance Changes titled Sustainable Public Sector in the Times of Uncertainty, a topic which is indeed very relevant. Every year, this conference provides us room for focusing on the changes in the area of public governance, sharing of experience, sharing scientific experience, as well as share our general practice in the field. The participants of the conference included those from the Czech Republic, Estonia, the US, Latvia, Poland, the Netherlands, Norway, Slovakia, Sweden, Ukraine, Germany, and other countries. Scientists and practitioners have discussed the change tendencies in the field of public sector. They focused on the importance of cooperation in order to ensure the efficiency of public governance, as well as striking balance between satisfying social needs and meeting the requirements for seeking efficiency in the public sector. They focused on the activities in the field in the context of the pandemic. Last year, the conference focused on the sustainability of the public sector, as well as the importance of sustainability in the field, as well as on the experience of other countries with regards to public sector governance. Today, we will focus on sustainability and uncertainty, two keywords that focus on the two main challenges in the public sector. The conditions within the sector change constantly. Sometimes they do that at a very rapid pace, whereas public sector must remain stable, efficient, and meet the needs of the people. I'm grateful to the keynote speakers of this conference for dedicating their time to sharing their experiences and insights in the conference. I invite everyone to take the opportunity and engage actively in the discussion and share your experience. In order to increase the sustainability of public sector, we must constantly be on the search for the best solutions in the sector. Thank you very much.
Labai ačiū už įkvepiantį sveikinimo žodį.
Thank you very much for the very inspiring, welcoming words. And let us now begin our plenary session. To begin the session, I would now like to give the floor to the first keynote speaker. Before I do that, let me just ask the keynote speakers, would you agree that the questions from the audience would come after both of you deliver your speeches? Because it will be easier for you, I believe, to respond to them. Okay, so let's start then. I would now like to give the floor to Professor Stein Kuhnle, who will represent the University of Bergen, Norway, and he will focus on the welfare state in times of uncertainty, how to achieve sustainability. So, Professor, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. I put this down here. So, I've been given the task of saying something about this huge topic, which consists of three major concepts: the welfare state, uncertainty or times of uncertainty, and how to achieve sustainability. These are some very big topics, and I will try to make some general reflections. I start with the welfare state. There are many definitions of the welfare state, but basically it's about the government's responsibility for the well-being of its citizens. But it can be defined in many ways. And what kind of responsibility, how wide, what does it say to mean to protect, and what does basic well-being mean? I mean, these are given different content at different times in different countries. So this has inspired many scholars to start classifying welfare states in different types, different models they also talk about. So there are different concepts, reflecting that there are different conceptions of welfare as such, what is welfare, and also the role of government in providing welfare. So we find a lot of variations, as you know, among nations as to needs covered, population coverage, financing, organizing different programs, regulating, and benefit levels and eligibility, and so on. And I just want to mention one very path-breaking study by the Danish sociologist Gösta Jesper Andersen, who in 1990 published the book The Three Worlds of Welfare Capitalism. His book was based on study of Western countries, and his studies and his data is before the changing democratization of Eastern and Central Europe after 1990. But still, it was a path-breaking study at the time, where he distinguished between three welfare regimes, a kind of liberal, American kind, conservative, corporatist, the German one, or continental Europe, and the so-called social democratic one, which was basically the Nordic countries. So a lot can be said about that book, and it's been a lot of criticism of the book, but it's by now the most cited book on welfare state research in the world. So it has inspired a lot of comparative welfare state research after this publication. So now you see a lot of scholars inventing new concepts and also studying other parts of the world. So comparative welfare state research was basically very Western, very limited Western approach. But then after 1990, it became a much more global focus to study welfare states. So I will not go through these concepts. I mean, every scholar wants to find a new concept because then it became more famous. So I think this is one of the reasons why you have so many concepts. I don't think you need all of them. So welfare states come in different forms and sizes. Type or model of welfare states in itself related to sustainability, I would say. But again, sustainability also a question of what kind of welfare state do you want to sustain. So it's a lot of normative foundations of different kinds of welfare states. So I think a basic distinction can be made between welfare states as to what weight they put on different principles for welfare provision. So basically, I think you can distinguish between three basic fundamental principles: the principle of means testing, the principle of individual merit. That means that you get back what you pay in, so to speak. There's or at least there's a link between what you give to the society and what you get back. So very often this is a kind of basic principle of insurance systems. And the last principle is the principle of citizenship, that you get benefits just by having status as a member of society, as a citizen of society. So all welfare states are based on a combination of these principles. You find no one which is purely based on one of these principles. But I think sustainability can be related to the balance of these principles. And I think that for a welfare state primarily relying on the principle of universalism, that all citizens are covered by different social programs, is probably both more conducive to redistribution and limited poverty. And I think some empirical research will support that. And so maybe also more sustainable than the welfare state primarily building on the principle of means testing. So the idea is that universal programs acknowledge that we are all stakeholders, that we are all at risk at one time or another, and that we are all potential or actual beneficiaries. So just a little footnote on why do we have a socially active states. So I think historically you can distinguish between a lot of factors. one more or less important than the other. But there are different reasons for why state has become socially active. So historically, I think it was the welfare state was born, so to speak, by the identification of new social problems because of industrialization and not least of capitalism, and also contagious diseases, which is also a big topic today. And this motivated new innovative policies. Another motivation was to maintain regime stability, and this was principally the motivation by Bismarck in Germany in the 1880s. He said so himself. This was his motivation to preserve his regime. And maybe Xi Jinping in China has the same kind of motivation in China, where social policies are developed quite rapidly. Other reasons could be efforts to integrate the state and nation, and also, of course, as democratization came underway and political parties were formed, it was also a question of a response to democratic mobilization from below. But a number of parties and a number of different kinds of governments has been responsible for the development of welfare states. It's not one party. Not one party can take a patent on the welfare state. So later, I think there are a lot of other reasons or motivations for developing social policies and for having an active social state, not least demographic concerns, ideas about social justice and rights, as a result of class compromises and negotiations between trade unions and employers' associations. It can also be argued that to have a well-functioning welfare state is good for the economy. It's good for also economic efficiency and economic stability. It's also been studied a lot of social programs as a part of social investment, investing in human capital, which is also good for the economy, and a reconciliation of work and family, and also, not least, what I think is one major part of the welfare state, that it is to equalize life chances. Since we are born into different kind of social circumstances in different parts of countries, there's also the role of the government to try to equalize our life chances. Just a little footnote on a little study I did with one of my colleagues. We wanted to study the arguments for introducing universal old age pensions. And we chose to study Canada, Mauritius, and Norway. 3 countries in different parts of the world, different continents, but these countries were all among the first countries in the world to introduce universal old age pensions after the Second World War. And we tried to group different kinds of arguments, and as you see, some were related to community and nation building, some related to values of human dignity. I think this was a very important argument just after the Second World War. And the third was related to economic and administrative considerations, that you can save a lot on bureaucracy if you make programs universal. And it could also, in many places, also be a way to avoid corruption. If everybody is entitled, just by being old enough, being a citizen old enough, you don't need a bureaucracy to make a decision who deserves it or not. So, and I think I just make this footnote because I think it's useful to also look at the historical arguments for introducing programs when we also look at sustainability today. Why did these programs develop the way they did? And are some of these arguments still valid? And to what extent are they valid? So this was a little study published in Global Social Policy journal. So I come to the second big concept in the headline. Times of uncertainty. I think if I talk to all my colleagues internationally, the welfare state seems to be in crisis all the time. It's a constant. And I found a lot of book titles over the last 50 years where you can see different ways of formulating this crisis concept. The physical crisis of the state, the welfare setting crisis, a major study by the OECD 40 years ago, dismantling the welfare state, the end of the welfare state, withering the welfare state, after the welfare state. So, I mean, this has been a major topic for welfare state researchers over a long period of time. But there's one exception to this line of book titles, and that is a book I edited in 2000, Survival of the European Welfare State. And that was, I edited that book because I thought you needed different perspectives too. I mean, you can always talk about crisis. There are always problems in the welfare state. There are always problems in public policies. But if you have a long-term historical perspective on development, you will see that the welfare state has gradually grown. It's been fairly stable in terms of expenditures as part of proportion of gross national product over the last 30 years. But of course, it's changing all the time. I think it can show that it's been quite resilient. So there are different ways of looking at development, and I think how you look at it, how do you decide to look at it, what kind of perspective you want to and how do you want to interpret the development, it's important for also how you evaluate or assess the current problems. So I said that survival of the European welfare state is possible and likely and desirable if one listens to the voice of the majority of European voters. Votes counts, I say. So if you look at welfare states in the OECD area today, you see a varying scope. But the two big items on the budget is health and old age pensions. And with demographic change, this will still be the major challenges for sustainability. I think the demographic change with aging of society and also migration may play a role. So you can see that in, well, I'm not sure you can see it, but anyway, the big two fields for expenditure are health and pensions. And Lithuania is a little bit below OECD average, Norway is a little bit above, but the biggest spender is France, has been for a long time. This doesn't say very much about how the welfare state is built, the composition of the welfare state, the quality of the welfare state, doesn't say anything. It's just a crude indicator, I think, of how much governments spend on welfare and social programs. So uncertainty, I think the circumstances in which welfare states first arose and developed and the circumstances in which they operate today are very different. So one challenge is that rising inequality threatens to undermine social cohesion. I think we see this in several countries. And there is a risk of downward spiral of declining trust and support, which may make it difficult to sustain the kind of welfare states we have seen have been developed. But of course, it's also a question what kind of welfare states you want to sustain. And also, of course, demographic change and international business cycles require constant reconstruction or work on the welfare state. So, and of course, today, the current accumulation of events are quite exceptional, and they add to these normal challenges of demographic change and international economic development. So the Russian war in Ukraine, and we don't know how that will end. The refugee crisis, which is partly created by this war, which had also disrupted supply chains and caused high inflation in many countries, and energy and food shortages. And that's also we see increased geopolitical rivalry. So all these are more uncertainty being brought into the study of welfare state change and how governments got a lot more on their agenda to deal with than normal when discussing welfare reforms. In the case of sustainability, which is the last concept in the headline, I think we can distinguish between three dimensions of sustainability. One is economic or fiscal sustainability, how to afford the welfare state, how to maintain affordability. And this may require relatively high levels of direct and indirect taxation, which may be a challenge in itself in the area of more international economic integration and globalization, and because of demographic change with the aging of society. So this is one big challenge, to maintain affordability. Another dimension is political sustainability, maintaining the political will to maintain or develop and improve the welfare state. So this is also a question of reform capacity and efficiency of governance in times of new competing issues on the agenda, such as energy problems, security, not least, environment. Welfare issues normally, at least in Western Europe, used to be on the top of the agenda in every election. Health problems, pensions, education, so on. But now these issues have to compete with all these other related to security, energy, and environment. So that may be a big challenge in itself for those who want to preserve and develop a welfare state. So maybe one political challenge is to modify people's expectations and maintain popular support for the welfare state and trust and legitimacy. So, and one element, one trend we also see that is more privatization of welfare, or at least private services being developed at the same time on the side of the public provision of services. This may not be a zero-sum game, but you can risk a more social division of welfare, which again can have political consequences on problem on how to maintain general popular support for public social welfare. So the last dimension of sustainability, I would say, is what we can call moral sustainability, maintaining commitment to social solidarity and social cohesion, and uphold an inclusive and universal welfare states in times of rapid changes in the labor market and transport more heterogeneous populations and ethnic diversities. So it's a question of how to meet the challenge of what we can call welfare chauvinism and political backlash in European welfare states in the context of free movement of citizens and non-discriminatory EU legislation on social security. I'm myself involved in a project right now where we are making some survey experiments to check whether people in different countries would like to give labor immigrants the same benefits as their native populations. And we did this survey experiments in Norway, Sweden, Germany, and Britain, and we find that in all countries, citizens on average would give immigrants less benefits than their own workers, own population, in spite of the EU rules which say you should not discriminate. So it's an interesting study, I think. We really control for nationality and immigration status, and this could be a challenge in itself to maintain this moral commitment to social solidarity and cohesion, and that everybody are dealt with equally when they also are supposed to be dealt with equally. You have equal rights when you move across countries in Europe. So, taking these three dimensions all together, I think we can say that sustainability requires a very multifaceted policy approach. There are a lot of issues involved in developing sustainable welfare and social policies. So achieving sustainability, I think it's a question of political will, support, and capacity to sustain and adapt, in addition, of course, to the affordability, economic conditions. So I just made a list of some challenges and some possible examples of political responses to these challenges. So one challenge we can call global economic integration or regional economic integration and competition. So, and the answer to that could be either to modify benefit generosity, stricter eligibility, or higher taxes. But how likely is that? How is that possible? Is that likely? So what do you do if it's not possible to raise taxes or to keep high taxes, if there's more international competition? Demographic change is a very, very important challenge, I think. Aging of the population and also migration issues. So in all European countries, you see examples of pension reforms in different ways. You see most visibly in France for the time being, with some very violent demonstrations, which would be more unthinkable in my part of the world, in Scandinavia. But I think that pension reforms is one possible solution, but there are also technological innovations which can be helpful in social care and in health sector. And there are also other possible political answers to this. Changing labor markets is also one challenge. And there's been a lot of discussion on minimum wages in the European countries. Also to have more emphasis on re-education programs. And it's also been discussed in many countries whether to introduce some kind of basic income. And there's been a research experiment in Finland on this, but a very limited one. But they didn't continue that project. It didn't show very important results. And this is maybe a possible solution, but it can be very expensive to introduce basic income programs. So I don't think it's very realistic for the time being. Privatization, as I mentioned, could be one challenge also for the public state welfare system we have. And one solution to that is to have maybe more government regulation to avoid this social division of welfare. I can just give one example from Norway. In 2004, there were 50,000 people who had private health insurance. And now, 20 years later, we have 700,000 with a private health insurance, even though we had a red-green government for 8 years and it increased rapidly. So, but still, as I said, this does not necessarily be a zero-sum game. There's also been a lot of investment in public health, but it can also change the political dynamics of policies on health, because it will be the well-off who can take out the private health insurance, and that can make them less interested in improving the public health system. And it can also have consequences for recruiting doctors and nurses and so on. So I think it's a latent challenge for the kind of very public, strong welfare state we have in the Nordic countries, at least. And then, of course, work-life balance is another challenge, and I'll not go more into that. So a little note on globalization. Is European and wider international economic integration and competition a threat to the national welfare states? And there are different hypotheses about this. One hypothesis is that, yeah, maybe that is a threat, that high levels of state provision of social welfare are not considered sustainable in an internationally integrated, economically integrated world. So that hypothesis has quite some support among many economists, I would say. Some political scientists, I'm a political scientist, would say that it's not necessarily a challenge to the welfare state. They could call it a compensation hypothesis, that the welfare state compensates for the risks that accompany economic openness. I think the Nordic countries represent one example of this. It's always been very open economy, but also very strong at the same time developing welfare state. And I think I show the example of Finland, which experienced a huge crisis when the Soviet Union dissolved, they lost 25% of the trade overnight, so to speak, and unemployment surged in 1 year. But at the end of the decade, there was not more poverty, not more social problems than before the crisis. And I think this is basically because you had the well-developed welfare state in place when the crisis suddenly and unexpectedly hit the country. So that's why I say the welfare state may also be considered a buffer against sudden changes in the international economy. And a third hypothesis, which I also partly support myself, is that the welfare state itself is globalizing. There's a potential for greater European and international consensus on taxation to prevent the so-called race to the bottom. And I think the EU many years ago introduced a minimum value-added tax, general value-added tax, there can be differentiation of course, of 15%. And that was a way to avoid this race to the bottom, on competing too much on taxation levels. And also you see globally that there's a lot of growth of social programs which may also underpin sustainability of welfare states in our part of the world. So you see more conditional cash transfer programs in many developing countries, coming from Latin America first, but also to Africa and parts of Asia. You have a more trend towards more universalization of healthcare, and you have introduced a lot of non-contributory social pensions are introduced of various kinds in different countries. So I think to discuss sustainability, you also have to think about developments beyond the nation state. I mean, the welfare state is basically a national project, but in today's world, integrated world, you need also to talk about how you can sustain the welfare state together with other countries and not compete against each other to the bottom, so to speak. So I think sustainability requires international cooperation, coordination, and regulation to preserve also the nationalist welfare states. So I will not read all the text, but I think what you see in more labor and capital mobility, contagious diseases, we've just been through the pandemic, and climate change, all of these issues are cross-national. They are a challenge for all countries. So that really is a kind of requires international cooperation of various kinds to meet these challenges. And I think we are in a good way in Europe, relatively speaking, in the world, towards more better social integration. And so far, I think European or the EU represent the best practice model for other regions of the world. So I think that's what more or less within half an hour. Thank you very much.
Ačiū labai gerbiamam kolegai. Iš tikrųjų, tonas konferencijos.
Thank you, colleague. Well, I believe you have already set the tone for today's conference. It definitely widens our horizons and forces us to focus in a more in-depth way on the current challenges facing today's world. Now, for the next keynote speech, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Ilona Bartuševičienė, Mykolas Romeris University. She will present to you a presentation on strengthening public sector resilience and the quality of services, focusing on the research conducted with a group of colleagues. So please, the floor is yours.
Aš gal susitvarkysiu čia kaip nors, atrodo, nes viskas tvarkoje. Ir tiesiog su šita, ar ne? Aha, okei. Gerai. Labą dieną visiems susirinkusiems čia.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all express my gratitude to the first presentation. It was a really interesting speech which allowed us to get more acquainted with the macro level of public governance, something that we need to focus when it comes to sustainability. In my presentation, I will focus on the micro level, that is, what is happening with our public sector, especially vis-à-vis sustainability in the sector, and the organizations that function in the field. My name is Ilona Bartuševičienė, and today I will present to you the results of a project that we have conducted together with a team. So I'd like to take the opportunity to present the members of my team, namely Professor Mindaugas Butkus. Mindaugas, please show yourself. So Professor Mindaugas Butkus, the team leader of our group. Also we have Dr. Habilitus Ms. Ona Gražina Rakauskienė, please stand up as well. Thank you very much to you as well. Ms. Lina Volockienė, another colleague of mine, she is joining us online. So today I will focus on a national level issue. However, the approach to the methodology and the model is based on foreign practice. Now, what was the reason for focusing on this topic? We've launched the project a couple of years ago. It was the time when we were about to begin our dealings with the COVID, so we were already facing a certain moment of uncertainty. And uncertainty is something that we are focusing today a lot. COVID pandemic presented a lot of uncertainty, something that we were completely unprepared. When it comes to the political situation, the war in Ukraine was again something that caught us by surprise. Or perhaps that would be too silly to say it like that. The entire situation in Europe was quite different. However, at that time, we had to deal with a number of different crises of uncertainty, and we had to focus on ways to managing them and containing them. So we first of all wanted to take a look at sustainability as to what it means and what is its relation to the services provided by the public sector. As we all may know, residents that need to receive healthcare services, parents who are taking their children to school, or in general, people who get services from a number of different public organizations. Well, for us as people, we don't care about the crises that are taking place. And the organizations are apparently unable to react and respond urgently in the crises that are happening around them. And the people don't care just about those crises. So we wanted to focus on the quality of the services provided by these organizations. Now, if we look at the concept as to what sustainability means, we basically focused on sustainability in terms of 3 dimensions. Again, we've done this through the paradigm of different foreign research, and we've generally identified resilience in the area of the ability of organizations to prepare for change, as well as to the ability to adapt to change in changed circumstances, although the concept of adaptation is something that is quite difficult to define. We can basically relate this to the evolution of the organization, meaning that the organization is capable to adapt to the circumstances that have changed. Our understanding of adaptability was modified according to the definitions by foreign researchers. That is, we focused on the quality of adaptability of organizations, meaning that the quality of the organization to draw experience from the lessons learned by them or by other organizations.
COVID-19 pandemijos metu ir kokius pokyčius mes pritaikytume prie to. Ar iš tiesų visuomet...
And the final stage that we focused was the ability to learn from the experience of shocks. Let's say the one that we have experienced in time of the pandemics, and whether we are able to transfer the experience of shocks into our daily activities. So when it came to the public organizations, we focused on the planning of the processes in preparation for the crisis, adaptability to the crisis, and the ability of organizations to make sure that their staff is prepared to respond to the crisis quickly and adapt to the changing situations, as well as their ability to take the necessary decisions, as well as their willingness to take the necessary decisions. In public organizations, very often the situation is that the staff members are less inclined to share their experiences in the organizations. However, this means that the organization loses a lot because, again, everything is from bottom to the top. This kind of approach is the one that dominates the functioning of organizations. And finally, what we do with the information that we gain in the experience. As researchers, we believe that all these areas that we have assessed when it came to resilience of organizations have to be developed equally. This was something that was presented in our final results of our research. In the process of the research, well, today's presentation is more of an empirical character. We will just share the results of our research. But as for our methodology in assessing resilience, well, we received a lot of questions from the organizations that were surveyed. They've asked us what methodology we applied. So let me just tell you that the methodology was not devised by us, because the project lasted for 2 years. And that's not a very long time for developing the methodology, the scoreboard for a project of the type like this. So we've applied resilience benchmark tool, which we've adapted not only for Lithuania in general, but also for the public sector, because not all of the questions based on the scoreboards were designed for the public sector in particular. And finally, we focused on the quality of services provided by these organizations, because we wanted to assess the resilience not only at the Lithuanian, the national level, but we also looked into a deeper, broader context. The quality of services was assessed in terms of 10 dimensions.
Kuomet kiekviena sričių buvo reprezentuotas vienu klausimu.
So in general, we've presented questions to the residents surveyed when it came to these 10 qualities. Now, as for the research itself and how we collected the data, this was the part of the project that posed us the majority of challenges, because the results of the research are as good as the data collected.
paklausti būtent
Basically,
to,
what you
kad
get
kas
is what
padėtų mums
what
tuos
you are
rezultatus
what you
atskleisti.
ask for is
Tyrimų
what you
etapus
get.
Vykdėme 3 etapai. Visų pirma, atlikome ekspertinę
We've
apklausą.
conducted our
Ekspertinė
research
apklausa mums buvo
in
reikalinga
3
tam, kad mes
phases.
pateiktume
During the first phase,
mūsų
we've
turimas
conducted the
metodikas ir
survey of
paklaustume
experts.
tyrėjų,
This was
gal
basically
ar jūs
to
suprantate? Tiesiog,
make
ar jūs
sure that
suprantate, ko mes
the
klausiame?
experts
Nes dažnu atveju vėlgi nutinka, kad
have a full
mokslinės
understanding
bendruomenės atstovai
as
lyg ir
to
jiems
what
atrodo
we are
viskas čia
asking
aišku,
them.
bet kai išneši klausimą,
Because sometimes
žmogui
everything seems to be
ir
very
jis
clear
nesupranta,
to
ko nori
you, but
paklausti. Tai mes
when you
norėjome,
are forced to
norėjome
ask
šito
people
momentu
about certain things,
įsitvirtinti ir
apparently
jaustis,
they may find it
komfortabiliai
difficult to
einant
respond to your
tolyn.
questions. So to
Taipogi
make sure that we are
ekspertų
comfortable
klausėme,
with the
kaip jų
research,
nuomonė,
we've posed the
kaip jie
questions to
vertina
the
kiekvieną iš
experts.
atsparumo
In
sričių.
addition to that,
Tai
we've
yra,
also
kokią
asked the
svarbą
opinion of
suteikia
experts
kiekvienai iš atsparumo sričių.
on
Mūsų
the
nuomone,
importance of resilience with regards to the
tyrėjų,
different
kuria mes rėmėmės
areas
kitais
of our
moksliniais
research.
šaltiniais, visos
As
jų
researchers,
dedamos dalys
we
turėtų
believe that
būti
the
vystomos
said
vienodai.
3
Pamatysime,
areas
ką
of
mano apie tai
assessment
ekspertai.
have to be developed
Duomenys buvo rinkti,
equally, but we will see what the
visos
experts
Lietuvos,
have said.
mastu.
Now, the
Organizacijos,
data
kurios
was
teikia
collected
viešąsias paslaugas,
nationwide.
reikia
Organizations that provide
kaip
public services
pripažinti ir
were
pasiguosti, kad iš tiesų
surveyed.
tokios statistikos kaip organizacijos teikiančios viešąsias paslaugas mes Lietuvoje neturime.
We can simply say that there's no statistics on the organizations providing public services. We are cooperating with Lithuania Statistics, with Statistics Lithuania, on having such data regarding the organizations providing public services, but for our research, we didn't have that information available. Apparently, there is a need for such a register of this kind of information. So we've surveyed a total of 401 public services providing organizations. And the third stage was questioning the quality of services. Now, this was done by surveying Lithuanian residents. However, our goal was not only to survey the Lithuanian residents, something that would have been very easy to do. Instead, we wanted to focus on those residents that were using the public services of the organizations that we have surveyed in particular. This was not an easy task. We've seen certain discrepancies. Some of the questionnaires even have to be eliminated simply because we've noticed that everything was marked as assessment is plainly excellent, and that's it. So we believe that this kind of statistics was not very accurate. So we've collected a total of 4,226 questionnaires, and we received inquiries from the organizations as to what is the basis for our questionnaire to make sure that the results are representative. Well, I have to say that the results cannot be treated as representative of every institution, because some organizations survey up to 10 residents, while the number of people surveyed by other organizations is quite different. Now, when it comes to the characteristics of our organization, for us it was very important that the organizations we have surveyed represented all the available public services provided, as well as the districts that they are working in, and the different sizes that the organizations can be. In our research, we've also observed that a lot of attention is focused on the characteristics of a CEO of the organization, or the head of the organization. So apparently the education, the gender, the age of the CEO of public organizations matters.
mes taipogi gavome ir jie yra
We
gana
received
įdomus ir
those results from our surveys. The results are quite interesting, I have to say.
Nenuviliantys.
And
Iš tiesų
really,
buvo
they did
gana
not disappoint us.
įdomu analizuoti. Čia norėjome
It was
pasidalinti
quite an
tam tikrą
interesting
statistiką,
analysis.
vėlgi, kaip
Now,
sakiau,
here we wanted to
kaip
share some
minėjau, duomenų
statistics.
surinkimas
As I have mentioned,
buvo
collecting
gana,
data was
daug
really
iššūkių keliantis
challenging.
momentas. Ir norėjome pasidalinti taipogi, kuriuose miestuose
So we wanted
daugiausia
to
buvo
share
organizacijų
our
atsisakiusių
experience
dalyvauti
on the
tyrime.
organizations
Tai, kaip matome, Vilniuje,
that refused to take
Klaipėdoje
part in our
iš tiesų buvo,
survey. So as you can see,
gana aukštas
in
procentas
the
ir
districts
norėjome
of
pasižiūrėti į
Vilnius
tuose-
and
tose
Klaipėda,
apskrityse, koks yra atsparumo
the
lygis.
number of
Taipogi
organizations that refused to take part in the survey was quite high. Now,
Kitoje
we've also
mūsų lentelėje ar grafike matome vėlgi organizacijų, kurios atsisakė
looked
dalyvauti
into the
tyrime pagal
statistics
tai,
on the
kokias
organizations
paslaugas
that
jos
refused to
teikia. Tai
participate in the
teisinės,
surveys in terms of
teisėsaugos
the
paslaugas
services that they
teikiančios
provide.
organizacijos, kurios,
So those that provided
labiausiai
mainly
nenorėjo
legal or law
įsitraukti
enforcement
į
services were the
tyrimą.
ones that were
Priežasčių mes neanalizavome ir bandėme nustatyti, ar yra
mainly
ryšys tarp
the ones that refused to
atsparumo
take
lygio
part in the
ir
survey.
atsisakymo procento, tiek pagal kokią apskritį atstovauja, tiek pagal kokią paslaugų sritį. Dėja, čia teko nusivilti, statistinio ryšio nėra.
There was no
Tai mes galime tik tai pasidalinti
connection, statistical connection between those
kad
organizations that
tokia
refused to
situacija yra,
participate in
bet tai
the
nepaaiškina
survey
atsparumo lygis ir
and
atsisakymo procentas
the
nepaaiškina
quality of
šių
services or the
rezultatų.
resilience
Bendras
of those
atsparumo lygis
organizations.
Lietuvoje yra gana aukštas.
As for the general
Vertiname skaloje nuo
average level
1
of
iki 7.
resilience of our public
Ir
organization surveyed,
matome, rezultatas yra
the
gana
indicator,
aukštas, tačiau kai pradedame jau
the average is
žiūrėti į
quite high, it
dedamąsias
stands
atskiras
at
sritis,
6.
matome, kad
However, when
gebėjimo
we
nuolat
look at the
mokytis sritis
different
yra
areas of
aukščiau
assessment, we
vidurkio,
see
gana
that the
ženkliai aukščiau
ability to learn from the experience of shocks exceeds our average, which goes to show that our public organizations focus a great deal on the
Jeigu pasižiūrėsime pagal apskritis, turime Marijampolę, Kauną, Alytų, Klaipėdą, kuriuose atsparumo
learning by doing.
lygis yra
Now, if we look into
ir toliau jau
the assessment
raudonai
of our
išryškintas, gal Telšių,
performance in
Panevėžio,
terms of resilience of
Šiaulių
public
apskritys
organizations
yra
with respect to the
tos,
different
kuriuose
districts,
atsparumo lygis
apparently
buvo žemesnis ir žemiau
Marijampolė
vidurkio.
or Kaunas
Pagal
districts
organizacijos
are in the
dydį
lead.
didelės ir vidutinės
Telšių,
organizacijos yra tos, kuriuose
Telšių district, Panevėžio
kas įdomu,
district
kai žiūrėsime į paslaugų kokybę,
are the ones that are lagging behind.
paviršutiniai. Ši skaidrė iš tiesų džiugina, labai džiaugiamės ir didžiuojamės, kad
Now, this
visgi
slide
nėra
represents the results that we
skirtumo,
can
ar
definitely take pride
organizacijai
in.
vadovauja moteris ar
Apparently,
vyras.
there's no difference whether the organization is led by a male or a female when it comes to the resilience of the organization. I believe this is something that could be treated as an achievement for our country. Now, when it comes to the age of the leaders of our public organizations, apparently those that are 50 and older are those that represent organizations that have a higher level of resilience. As for the education of the CEOs of public organizations, again, the organizations that have a CEO with higher education have a higher level of resilience. And I have to say that we had 25 CEOs of the total CEOs of organizations surveyed.
Viešajame sektoriuje dažnu atveju vienas iš reikalavimų yra turėti ne mažesnį.
But this is basically related to the fact that our CEOs in the public sector are required to be of at least a master's or a higher degree, to have a master's or a higher degree to assume such positions.
teorinį momentą ir praktinį.
Now, in this graph, we wanted to present our research from the theoretical perspective and from the practical perspective. In the top, we can see something that is represented by our scientific theory. Apparently, all of the areas of assessment must correlate between one another, and they must be developed equally and have links between one another in order to ensure sustainable level of resilience of public organizations. However, the results of our research demonstrated that planning and adapting to crises and the results of our survey within those fields demonstrate to us that the public organizations that they do plan and prepare for the crises, but when it comes to the learning from experience, apparently there is no connection between the learning from experience and the preparing for the crisis, planning or adapting to the crisis. So apparently there's a missing link between these two areas with the final one. Well, this was the result of the experts survey. Now, when it comes to the leaders of our organizations, apparently when it comes to planning or adapting to crises, these two areas influence one another. They correlate between one another. And adapting, apparently, the stage of adapting is something that is connected to learning by doing. Well, perhaps at the point when we will focus on the final outcome of our research, we will be able to look into the connection of these skills and these three stages and the provision of quality services. According to the results of the survey of our CEOs of public organizations represented in the first graph, apparently our CEOs focus more on learning from the experience, whereas experts tell us that preparing and planning for crises is the most important stage in ensuring resilience of public organizations. Now, let's move on to the quality of services. Now, as for the consumer's perception or the opinion of the services provided, apparently the cultural or sports services, services for the business, tourism-related services are the ones that exceed the established average of the quality of services. Now, looking into the consumer's opinion of the services provided in organizations of different sizes, apparently our consumers believe that the qualities are of higher services, are of a higher quality in smaller or micro organizations. Now, in terms of the districts of the public organizations, the consumers believe that the public organizations located in Kaunas district, Šiauliai district, or Tauragė district are the organizations functioning in those districts are the ones that provide higher quality services, because they exceed the average figure. So the statistics was quite visual, but for us as researchers it was important to look into the different
Tai gal labai nesileidžiant į
indicators,
detalės,
and without
tiesiog
going
noriu paaiškinti,
very
kad,
deep into
ką
the details,
reiškia ši
let me
grafa. Tai
just
ir
explain to you
gebėjimas
what the graph
pasirengti
represents.
pokyčiams,
So
mūsų
the ability to prepare
rezultatai
for
rodo, kad
change when it comes to
gebėjimas
this area of
pasirengti
assessment,
ir
our
gebėjimas
research shows that the
prisitaikyti,
ability to
adaptuotis,
prepare for
šios
change and the
dvi
ability to
dimensijos,
adapt
jos
to
yra
change circumstances,
susijusios, jos
those two
koreliuoja.
dimensions, they correlate between one
Ir
another.
gebėjimas
They are
adaptuotis
connected to one
savo
another.
ruožtu daro įtaką
And the ability to
mokymosi
adapt to change,
elementui,
in turn,
kuris tuomet jau
influences
įtakoja
the next
paslaugų
element,
kokybę.
the ability to
Dabar
learn
kaip,
from the experience of
ką
shops
tai
or the
reiškia? Mums šis
learning by
rezultatas yra
doing.
be galo svarbus,
This,
be
in
galo
turn,
iškalbingas, todėl
is
kad
reflected
kiekviena,
in the
po
quality of
kiekvienos
services.
krizės neįmanoma, kad organizacija grįžtų
Following
į tas
any
pačias
crisis,
vėžes ir
it is not possible for any of the public organization to return to the status quo that was before the crisis and to function with the same strategies and same resources before the crisis. Well, maybe there are such cases, but this is not sustainable and that should not be the case. So our research shows that public organizations tend to learn from crises. Organizations that have experienced the crisis, they learn from the crisis and they integrate their knowledge that they have learned into their further activities. And the knowledge learned automatically is transferred and reflected in the quality of services. Digitalization is also something that is very telling. Now, for every one of you, if you think about digital tools and how well you're skilled to adapt your digital skills to certain crises, or perhaps for us as academicians, we use Skype program the most. We did not have all the tools at our disposition that we have today, but Skype is one of the tools that we use quite often. And as for the availability of digital services in times of the crisis, the availability of digital services has increased drastically. So apparently our organizations are capable to learn from the experience. This is the result that we are definitely happy about, because compared to the similar research in foreign countries, apparently not all the foreign researchers are capable of boasting the same result as we did. So for us, this was quite an acceptable finding.
Kur matytume, kad organizacijose yra, ir ta rizika, kad planavimas neturi nieko bendro su paslaugų kokybe.
Now, as for the risks that we have observed, apparently planning had nothing to do with the quality of services, which means that in the phase of planning, apparently we are very far removed from the quality, providing quality services. This is something that shouldn't be the case. So, in the stage of planning for the crisis, we should already focus on the provision of quality services.
Tai tie klausimai, tų klausimų mes tyrimo apimtyje dar neanalizavome, bet čia yra
These are just some of the questions that we did not have an opportunity to focus in great depth in our research. We are still planning to do that. At this point, I would just like to present to you.
Man reikėtų dar kokių 4 minučių.
I think I still need some 4 minutes. If that's okay.
Gerai. Pati įdomiausia dalis.
The most interesting part.
Tai yra, mes pateikėme kiekvienai organizacijai, kurios dalyvavo tyrime.
To each organization survey,
we've presented ataskaitos apie jų atsparumo lygį, apie jų paslaugų kokybę. Tai kiekviena organizacija šios duomenis gavo ir kilo jau diskusijų, klausimų, galbūt galėsime plačiau padiskutuoti šiandien.
that
Tai
took
yra
part
mūsų
in the
kūriamas
survey.
prototipas, kuris šiai
This is
minutei
just
yra
a prototype
pristatomas
that we are
statinė išraiška vien
currently
dėl duomenų
presenting
saugos ir vadovai gavo
in a very
statinės
passive form
išraiškos tiesiog dokumentą,
because of
kuris nėra
the
interaktyvus.
huge scope
Bet
of
mūsų
the
tikslas
data that
yra,
we
ką
have
reiškia
collected, we
atsparumo
presented
vertinimas tam tikrų
this kind
metu.
of
Na
information
gerai, mes
to
įvertiname,
our
gavome
public
rezultatą, bet ką tai
organizations
reiškia?
in a
Jeigu nėra tęstinumo,
non-interactive
jeigu
way.
nėra palyginamumo su
Apparently,
kokie
if
mes
there's
buvome
no
vakar, tai yra tiesiog
a possibility to
tam tikra
compare
statistika,
the
kuri
status of
nelabai
the
turi daug pridėtinės
organization
vertės. Tai mes tai
that
matydami
was
kūrėme
yesterday and
instrumentą,
the one
kuris
that is
leistų
today,
organizacijoms
then
įsivertinti pačioms savo atsparumo
the
lygį.
organization cannot
Ir,
expect to achieve positive results. So
tai galėtų
this is a
daryti
tool for the public organizations
ne tik organizacijos
to
vadovas,
conduct
bet
a
įtraukti
certain
ir savo
self-assessment.
komandą, taipogi įtraukti ir klientus.
This can be done by the head
Organizacijoms
of
taip pat
the public
pateikėme jų
organizations by
rezultatus,
engaging the staff and
rezultatus pateikėme
the customers
vidurkį
that they
kiekvieno
survey.
rodiklio bei jų rezultatą pagal
We also
kiekvieną
present
kriterijų ar klausimą, kuris buvo
the
anketoje.
resilience indicators
Ta
in
pati
relation to
padarėme
the
ir su
averages of
paslaugų
respective
kokybe.
indicators for the whole sample.
Organizacijų vadovai gali matyti, kokie
So the
yra
CEOs of our
vidurkiai kiekvieno
organizations
rodiklio
can see
ir
the
kokia yra
average
jų
for
situacija.
every
Vėlgi, užbėgdama
service
galimiems klausimams
provided.
į priekį noriu pažymėti, kad jeigu jums atrodo, kad
I would just like to
rezultatas
jump the gun and
nėra
inform you that
toks, kokią norėtumėte,
if you
ypatingai
believe
su
that the
paslaugų
result is
kokybe,
not exactly the one that
priimkite
you
tai, kad jūsų
expect,
organizacijoje buvo
especially when it
apklausta
comes to
maksimum
quality of
10
services,
žmonių. Tai
bear
ar
in
galima
mind that a
daryti
total of
ir
10 people
prielaidą,
from
kad
the
tai jau
organization
ir
have been
nusako
surveyed.
jūsų
So you
paslaugų
should
kokybės
keep that in mind
lygį? Tikėtina,
when
kad ne, bet kai mes turime
thinking of
4000
the
duomenų, mums kaip tyrėjams tai
representative
yra aukso dovana ir duomenys,
results
kuriais
of
mes
this
galime toliau
survey,
judėti
whether they are
pirmyn.
representative
Taip
or
pat
not of
pateikiame
your
žemėlapius, kurie yra
institution.
interaktyvus pagal paslaugų kokybę
In
ir
our
pagal
tool, we
apskritis.
also present
Tai iš
an
tiesų su
interactive
šia
map in terms
informacija,
of the districts.
su šiuo prototipu mes norime padėkoti Vilniaus kolegijos tyrėjams ir Irma Šileikienė,
At this
prašau.
point, I would like to just take the moment and express my gratitude to Ms. Irma Šileikienė because it was the
tie
team led by
žmonės,
her
kurie mums padėjo kurti pradžioje.
who
Mes
helped us
iš
in
tiesų
developing this
nuo pat
prototype
pradžių
since the very beginning.
buvo aišku jiems, ko mes norime ir kokio
And
patys ne visai
since the very
žinojome,
beginning,
ir kokio
they
rezultato
find
norime.
it really
Ir tačiau visgi
clear as to what we need,
ačiū
even
jums,
though
kad padėjote mums
we
išgryninti
had some
galutinį rezultatą.
difficulties
Tai
in
einant kas tolyn,
explaining to them what we actually need.
kokie yra mūsų
So
tikslai,
thank you very much
mes
for helping
norėtume
us to
tęsti
deliver this
atsparumo
ultimate
tyrimus
result.
vadovų lygmenyje, ką jau
Now, as for
padarėme
the
šiuo
future
metu,
activities, we would like to conduct similar surveys at the CEO level, something similar to what we have done already, but perhaps including the staff as well in the surveys. Because from the research that we have conducted so far, we've observed that sometimes the CEOs have a very high assessment of the situation in the organization. However, the opinion differs when we survey staff.
Kurioje jie gali pradėti gilintis, kodėl yra tas atotrūkis ir priimti tam tikrus
So
sprendimus.
this would give an opportunity
Ir
for the
taipogi
CEOs to
klientų
focus on the
vaidmuo.
gap
Tai
between
mūsų ateities
the heads
tikslai
of the
yra tokie
organization and
tridimensiai,
the staff
kurie
members.
apimtų vadovus, darbuotojus, klientus
So
ir
we
kad tai mes galėtume daryti laiko
are
tėkmėje,
willing
kad galėtume
to
palyginti
focus
rezultatus
on
su
the results
savimi,
in
kokie
the
buvome
different, in
vakar,
terms of the
bei
different
su kitomis
group survey, that is the CEOs, the staff members, and the customers of the organizations. And this would also give us an opportunity to compare the situation with other organizations. Thank you very much, and I hope I didn't exceed my time.
Išjungiu, taip? Gerai.
Ačiū labai, Ilona. Puikus, labai įdomus pranešimas, gaila ribotas.
Thank you.
Konferencijos
A very interesting presentation indeed. Unfortunately, our time is limited. I hope that we will be able to address some of the questions during the discussion. I already see that there are some questions that have been put forward for the panelists. One question was from Mr. Mindaugas Butkus, who is present here in the hall. So I would kindly ask you to say this question out loud. Please use the microphone.
Transliacijos metu. Okay, is it working? Hello. My question is related with the first presentation about the welfare state. There was a little discussion about the rising income inequality. So my question is, what possible threats we have with the welfare state concerning the rising income inequality? How it could affect how we live and what possible solutions could be in this case?
I think it can create more problems of social cohesion and social solidarity, especially when those who are well off opt out of the public welfare system and go more private, as we see in many of the Nordic countries. Then I think it will be more difficult to keep up the support for the general public welfare state. We will get more differentiation of services. So I think there might be a political dynamic that political interests will differ more when you have more inequality. So it may be more difficult for governments to get support for the kind of policy they might need to support those who are not so well off. But this is a hypothesis. I mean, we don't know. But I think a rising inequality can be a challenge for sustaining the welfare state as we know it.
Dėkuoju, dar matau salėje klausimas, gerbiamas profesorius Arvydas Guogis.
Thank you very much. I still see that we have one more question from Professor Arvydas Guogis.
And to Associated Professor Ilona Bartuševičienė. So, what is, to your opinion, what are the reasons of lagging behind of large part of public sector in the Central and Eastern Europe and Lithuania including? What are the main reasons of lagging behind? For instance, Ilona, you see, we even don't have statistics for public services, developed statistics. So what are the main reasons lagging behind the private sector and lagging behind if compared with developed Western countries? Thank you.
Okay. Aš gal lietuviškai, nes vertėjus.
I'll speak English. First and foremost, Professor, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the problems that we are facing are not relevant to our country or to our region only. As we were looking at our work, we looked at the number of scholarly articles, and these articles were not devoted to our region particularly or to Lithuania. So the problems are universal, which means that there's always deficiency in budgets, there's always a strict hierarchical structure that prevents adoption of certain decisions. Also, there are some political aspects due to which unpopular decisions are not adopted. Moreover, we have staff members who do not have adequate skills, but that's not the fault of that staff. We ask the organizations what skills they lack, and most often the organizations were not able to provide us with a list of the skills that they needed. They said that they needed everything. They believed that their staff had to be inclusive in terms of digitalization. They have to be able to speak IT languages, to speak different foreign languages. But are these skills truly needed for the job they had to perform? So first and foremost, we have to look at what we need and what we have. In our case, I mean, in the case of Lithuania, the wages are also very important because the wages in the public sector are not attractive for high-level experts. Therefore, there are proposed methodologies as to how to work with the teams that we already have in place. So this means that we have to identify the problems, identify the skills we need, and only then try to invest in those skills. Quite recently, one of the leaders said that the more trainings there are in the organization, the more people in the organization feel disappointed and feel apathy, which is the opposite result of what had been expected from those trainings. So the organizations themselves fail to identify what trainings are needed for one particular person and whether these trainings will help that person to overcome the challenges in his daily work. So this is closely related with the satisfaction of workers. Also, employees, people believe that trainings are a waste of time. As Professor Kunle mentioned, that problems will always exist, but that does not mean that we have to stop at that. We have to try to deal with the problems. Thank you. Thank you for a very extensive answer. And now I'll try to invite the panelists to take their seats for the panel discussion. You know who has to come to the panel, but I'll simply say your names. Mr. Domas Griškevičius, member of the Committee on State Administration and Local Authorities. Ms. Sigita Šajavienė, Vice Minister of the Interior. Mr. Vitalijus Gailius, representative of the Association of Local Authorities in Lithuania and Mayor of Joniškis. Professor Dr. Vainis Smalskys from the Mykolas Romeris University, as well as Mantas Bileišis, a prorector from General Jonas Žemaitis Military Academy.
Taip, mikrofonas, matau, veikia ir galėsime tada ir
So the microphones are working. Now, when it comes to the order, I like to say that first I'll give the question, and then you will have to answer the question, and maybe then we will have several questions. So first I will ask to answer the question by the public sector representative. Is that okay with you? So, dear colleagues, so my first question is to vote it to the member of the Lithuanian Seimas. I will stick to the program because it will be much easier for me to follow. So the question is actually to everyone. Dear colleagues, we've already talked about the challenges that the public sector is facing. We also said that the challenges have been changing, but today we're also talking about sustainability. So what the public sector needs in order to ensure its sustainability and continuity when it comes to the long-term perspective rather than a short-term perspective. So what
viešojo sektoriaus organizacijų veiklos pagrindinius iššūkius
are the main challenges for the public sector in the recent years? What are the tendencies of the recent times? I believe that already during the first keynote speech, our guest professor already said that the public sector is always undergoing certain crises, and the current period was abundant in various crises. Everyone remembers the COVID-19 pandemic, which was followed by the migration crisis at the borders of the Republic of Lithuania, which was then followed by the integration of Ukrainian war refugees, and so on and so forth. So now what we do face is the interinstitutional communication problems. During all those crises, we noticed that there is a lack of cooperation. Institutions, in particular, those from the municipal, ministerial or governmental level, lacked cooperation and understanding. They have managed to solve the problems in one or another way. Unfortunately, we have wasted a lot of time. There was a lack of leadership of public sector organizations. There was a lack of courage to circumvent certain hurdles before some legal regulations were put in place. I believe that there are some leaders who still have to answer various institutions why they have behaved in one or another way, which goes to show that we have not learned one important lesson, that it is much safer to play safe and not to be courageous. Another challenge is that due to unfavorable level of wages, it is very difficult to attract high-level professionals and experts. Institutions and people are expecting positive outcomes from us, but I would say that the public sector finds it rather difficult to compete with the private sector, especially when it comes to very specific hard areas such as engineering, legal affairs, and many others, because private sector usually attracts the best specialists, the best experts, and the public sector has to somehow respond to the needs and expectations of the citizens and to try to maintain the quality of the services that they provide. Thank you. Mr. Madam Vice Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you. I'm truly happy that researchers and practitioners were brought together to discuss the problems, because I think that for politicians it's very important to see how practitioners see one or another problem. And having been in this conference, I'd like to say that we are facing challenges, severe challenges for the 3 years running. Some problems have even become even worse, which means that we need to implement reforms, because if we do not do this, the situation will deteriorate even further. Mr. Domas Griškevičius mentioned several problems, but I believe there is yet another problem when the states try to adopt decisions or to respond to various crises or emergency situations. So it's data management is another problem, and it is a very relevant problem for the country. And I believe that the presence of data, availability to data, access to data would help practitioners. Unflexible public service has been mentioned as yet another challenge on numerous occasions. We do lack true leaders who are not afraid to
Tai nelanksti valstybės tarnyba, lyderių stoka, na ir be abejo, susiduri, jog kompetencijas reikia ugdyti. Tai yra investicija į valstybės tarnautojus turi būti tam, kad problemų ateityje neturėtume. Tai sakyčiau, čia yra tokios esminės problemos ir visą tai lemia, kokias paslaugas gauna gyventojai. Tai jeigu valstybė neinvestuos ir nedarys tam tikrų pokyčių ir tos kryptis, kas šiuo metu yra pasiūlytos, na, iš tikrųjų jos turėtų būti priimtos tam, kad turėtumėm ateityje gerą rezultatą. Tai yra gyventojus, kurie džiaugtųsi ir būtų patenkinti paslaugom nepriklausomai nuo to, ar valstybė ar valstybėje atsirado krizė ar neatsirado. Sveikatos paslaugų reikia visiems reikia.
Because if there is crisis, the state has to prepare to give, let's say, public health care services remotely. The government has proposed to implement a reform, and I believe that this reform is a kind of a railway and a foundation for reforming the entire public sector. Well, I believe that this railway is towards sustainability. Am I not right? Mr. Vitalijus Gailius, being mayor of the municipality, what do you see as major challenges for the public sector? Thank you very much for the possibility, for the opportunity to speak on the challenges and sustainability of the public sector. I believe that, well, there are challenges. I'll have some arguments to base my conviction. Unfortunately, our public sector is lagging behind because we have failed to decommunize the sector for over 30 years now. Well, thank you, Professor, for encouraging the discussion. When I started working in the municipality, I looked at the budget and I saw that there is a line in the budget for planning. But unfortunately, strategic plans in the market cost quite a lot. So the municipality buys strategic plans. Therefore, I took a decision to trust the people working in the municipality rather than turning to the private market and buying the strategic plan from them for 100 or 200,000 euros. So we have drafted the plan for 2027 to ensure that our municipality system works in an efficient and sustainable way. With a focus on the consumer of our services.
Perkelsim paslaugas į viešą erdvę. Man tai yra taip banalu ir taip nuvalkiota, kad aš tiesiog
transferring services to the public space sounds something banal to me because I believe that we had to do this many years ago. We had to learn to operate in the IT world a long time ago. Well, luckily enough, we had the COVID-19 pandemic, which taught us all to work remotely. And it was much easier for us to work remotely because we live in a small municipality where everyone knows each other. And I believe that providing more trusting that person pays off.
Jie nevaikščiojo po šiukšlių dėžes ir nesiknaisėjo, nerinko kvitukų.
Because it is very important to work with people whom you trust and who trust you. So public sector in the times of uncertainty means that we need to place more trust on our citizens. Well, thank you. Well, you mentioned the prices for the strategic plans, but I believe that you contacted universities. The price would be by 10 times lower. But thank you again for your response. Well, we talked about the COVID pandemic, which led to improving our digital services. And well, yes, indeed, our public sector organizations are improving, but now let me turn to our researchers. I don't know which professor to turn to. Well, Mr. Vainis Valskys points fingers at Mantas Bileišis, while Mantas Bileišis points his fingers at Vainis Valskys. So I'll give the floor to Professor Dr. Mantas Bileišis from General Jonas Žemaitis Military Academy. Thank you very much. I'd like to support the ideas that have been expressed previously, and I don't think that I will be original in what I am going to say when it comes to sustainable public sector in the times of uncertainty.
Ieško analogijų mūsų epochai istoriškai, nes mes turim tą tokį pomėgį ieškoti gerosios praktikos, ten kaip daro šiaurės šalyse, kaip Izraelį, ten saugumą užtikrina ir panašiai. Tai man tokia viena iliustracija, kad kai kazokai pirmą kartą Vilnių sudegino 1665-aisiais ir kai jau Lietuva prijungė prie imperijos Rusijos praėjo 130 metų. 1790. Įsivaizduojant kokį nors gyventoją tam tarpe 130 metų, reiškia tas taškas jau negrįžtamumo tarsi pasiektas prieš 100 metų, jis ten vietoj nejaučia tos perspektyvos. Ir turbūt to tvaraus viešo sektoriaus kompetencija būtų tokia išvelgti ar numatyti tas didžiausias rizikas ir bandyti joms sudėti kažkokius saugiklius. Ir čia tokia viena įžvalga. Turėjau garbės prieš 5 metus klausyti Šveicarijos ministro pirmininko, kuris pilkas biurokratas, hiperfederalizmas, paskaitos apie tai, kaip šitiem šveicaram pavyko. Vienas iš klausytojų pranešimo paklausė, tai kaip jūs čia tokie fainai pasidarė. Pečiais trūktelį ir sako, tai mes neprasileidom ne vieną. Tai grubiai darant, iš tikrųjų, vienas iš tokių dalykų, jeigu kalbam apie mažą valstybę, kurią aš bandau populiarinti, kai tik manęs kas paklausė, tai taip pasižiūrėti tų statistikos duomenis ekonomiškai ir populiacijos prasme, mes esam toks Berlyno priemiestis. Visos 3 Baltijos šalys yra viena Berlyno miesto ekonomika ir kiek daugiau populiacijos prasme. Bet tai žiūrėt darbingo amžiaus žmonės, tai tam tikrą prasme turėtume, būdami maža šalis, turėti tos privalumus tvarumui. Tai reiškia greit reaguoti, greit adaptuotis, bet turėdami tokias sudėtingas hierarchijas ir koordinavimo problemų, tarsi padarom savo mažumą dar ir pabloginančių situaciją tvarumų ieškoti. Tai šioje situacijoje dar vienas veiksnys, kuris ieškant tokio Lietuvai pritaikomo šveicariško modelio yra mūsų visuomenių toks nenoras naujovių. Čia turbūt yra istorinės priežastys, mūsų mentalitetas. Tai pridėja, jeigu mes kalbam apie viešąjį sektorių ir tarnautojų vertinimą, kur tikrai per krizės daugelis vadovų viešajam sektoriui prisiėmė rizikas. Ir dabar tarsi jie turi mokėti. Rytietiško modelio palikimas, kad galbūt mes turime pradėti komunikuoti ir pradėti galvoti, pradėti planuoti būtent per tą prizmę, kad yra scenarius, tikėtinas scenarius ir ką institucija turėtų padaryti, kad tas institucijos vadovas mūsų realybėj, mūsų instituciniai sąrangoje nesusigadintų savo karjeros. Tai tada mindsetas, motivacija visiškai persijungtų. Ir tada galbūt demografiniai pokyčiai, dirbtinio intelekto pokyčiai ar ta pati klimato kaita, kurie tarsi šimtametės tendencijos ir mes kaip tie lietuviai 18 amžiaus pradžioje tarsi ir nejaučiam, juda kažkas, bet čia ne mums, kad jie pradėtų apie tai mąstyti, kad aš kaip vadovas galbūt čia atsiras kažkas tokio, kaip aš reaguosiu ir kaip aš išvengsiu. Tai pabaigai, jeigu grįžtant vėl prie to tokio viešojo diskurso, yra mano įsivaizdavimu 2 principai, kaip kažką bandyti padaryti. Bet ką, tame tarpe ir viešo valdymas. Tai yra olimpinis principas, reiškia, kaip būti pirmam, viena sporto šaka ir kita bėgimo nuo meškos sporto šaka, reiškia, kaip nebūti blogam. Ir iš tikrųjų tas ambicija turėtų būti turbūt mūsų kuklesnė, man atrodo, ką Ilona pastebėjo, dirbti to, ką turim ir galvoti per bėgimo nuo meškos principą. Kaip neprasileisti ir žiūrėk, po 100 metų mes būsime vietoj to, kad demografiniai krizai čia apipulti klimato pabėgėlių, galbūt būsim
Ačiū. Man tai nuo kazokų sudeginimo Vilniaus iki ateities mūsų Lietuvos kaip Šveicarijos. Ačiū. Profesorius Vainius Maisnis.
Aš irgi pritarčiau gerbiamą Mantui, tik tai norėčiau iš tikrųjų kalbėti čia daugiau gal apie neapibrėžtumą. Mane labiau domina, kaip keisis mūsų valdymo modeliai ir iš viso keisis. Nes iš tikrųjų, jeigu mes kalbam apie neapibrėžtumą, tvarumą, mes galime adaptuoti bet kokį modelį iš tikrųjų politinės sistemas, bet kalbant apie neapibrėžtumą, iš tikrųjų, čia toks tam tikras iššūkis, nes dabar mes tokios bendros kažkokios valdymo transformacijos ir tendencijos, kuri būtų tokia išryškinta, kaip ten buvo kokia naujoji viešoji vadyba ar New Public Management,
New Public Management, again, New Public Governance, I'm sorry.
Mes nematom
something that is not so evident or so visible, and in times of uncertainties,
tendencijos ar net paradigmos drįsčiau. Matyt, reikia galvoti apie
we won't be able to identify certain paradigms in our public government, and for a certain time I believe we will have to cope with a so-called meta-governance, a situation where we will have to deal with certain outcomes of the previous reforms, something that will lead from one thing to another with respect to our public government.
Valdymą, kurį mes turbūt ir dabar jau mokslininkai
vardiname. So the uncertainties will bring us to a situation where we will have features of non-centralized governance in the public sector, again, something that is a prerequisite of times of uncertainties. And we will also try to adapt certain innovations. So when it comes to innovation, when it comes to times of uncertainties, again, this will definitely influence our public
Gal
governance.
mano kolega moderatorius norėtų kažką pridurti, jeigu negalime tęsti.
My colleague moderator would like to add something.
Reikia mikrofoną įjungti.
Just please turn on the microphone.
Ačiū, kad galiu irgi prabilti.
Well, thank you for giving me the floor as well. Well, without commenting the things that have been said by the keynote speakers, I got the impression that we tend to observe certain issues, certain challenges. What about positive experience or positive instruments as a means of overcoming those challenges? Perhaps let's focus at the instruments at our disposal at the moment in order to respond to the existing challenges and become more resilient. Perhaps let's move on to our second question. Yes, the best practices.
Tiesiog, kad nebūtų tų patirčių, bet čia jau susijęs su valstybės valdymo kokybė, kai vienam ar kitam sektoriui pradės vadovauti žmogus neaiškiom aplinkybėm, atsidūręs toje vietoje, būdamas kurį laiką ir nežinodamas, ką daryti, jis turi kažką daryti. Ir žinokit, buvo tokia keista tendencija pastaruosius 25 metus, kad ir centralizuoju. Nesvarbu, kas bus, kokios pasiekmės, bet procesas vyksta. Reformą darau, centralizuoju. Ir du žodžius tai išmoko mūsų šitam istoriniam laikotarpiu. Tai arba centralizuoti, o decentralizuoti jau čia labai
retai. Right solution to the situation. So is this the positive or the negative situation that we're focusing today? I believe we were trying to focus on positive best practice examples, something that gives us an opportunity to appreciate the results, or perhaps there is nothing that we can boast of. So what can we do to move forward in general?
Merė, jau norite pratęsti, mačiau Sigita kėlė ranką.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to continue or Sigita?
Man atrodo veikia. Turėtų veikti.
Aš tik trumpai norėjau sureaguoti dėl strateginių planų rengimo ir įsitraukimo universitetams. Turbūt čia labai buvo gera tokia idėja, kad pasitikėkim žmonėm, įsitraukim tuos, kurie yra arčiau. Ir tai yra idėja, kurią turėtų vadovautis viešasis sektorius, nes tai, kad diskutuojam mokslininkai, kad diskutuojam praktikai labai gerai, bet turbūt tai, ko reikia, geriausiai žino mūsų žmonės. Tai va čia tokia trumpa reakcija būtų.
Dėl tų gerumų, tai man atrodo, nepaisant to, apie kokias mes problemas kalbėjom, kokios jos kyla ir kokios jos nuolat atsiranda, mes tikrai galime džiaugtis turimais rezultatais, ką ir rodo ir tyrimas, tai tas pasitenkinimas, ta kokybė, jinai, kad ir kaip mes norim dar tobulesnės, dar geresnės, bet iš esmės jinai tikrai yra ir negalima to nuneigti. Kitas dalykas, aišku, ką kitas profesorius minėjo, tai tam tikri nauji įrankiai, kaip įvairios programėlės, leidžiančios žmonėms labiau matyti, įsitraukti, greitai, operatyviai kažką pateikti, gauti operatyvų atsakymą, matyti, kaip vyksta procesas ar ne, tai kūrė irgi tam didesnį turbūt pasitikėjimo lygmenį. Aš gal tik tai išskirčiau, kur kita mūsų dar vis dėlto grįžtų prie problemų. Tai yra mūsų visuomenės, sakyčiau, vis labiau stiprėjantis individualizmas ir prie ko tai veda, man atrodo, kartais mes susidarom savo gyvenimuose. Matom kažkokias problemas mūsų visuomenėje, mūsų miestuose, prie stalo bendram draugų būry ar prie televizoriaus paburbam ant blogų sprendimų, bet vis mažiau įsitraukiame tuos visuomeninius procesus ir to, sakykime, nedarom tiesioginio spaudimo sprendimo priėmėjams, pavadinkim taip, bet nespaudimo blogąją prasme, bet diskusijų lygmenyje, ieškoti geriausių sprendimų. Tai aš va čia gal dar irgi tokią vieną problemą išskirčiau ir tiesą sakant, gaila, bet neturiu kažkokio tai recepto, kaip tą situaciją pakeisti, nes, sakau, tas stiprėjantis individualizmas, ypatingai matant jaunąją kartą, na, sakau, mane šiek tiek baugina, bet mes, jeigu, sakau, nedidinsim to gyventojų įsitraukimo tiesioginio, aišku, gražus Joniškio pavyzdys, kaip jie patys rengiasi ir galbūt tai padėtų, nežinau, bet, sakau, tai yra irgi labai didelė problema, nes be gyventojų įsitraukimo tiesioginio arba mažas įsitraukimas tikrai nepadės pasiekti tų siekiamų, norimų gerų rezultatų.
Dar reakcijų iš profesoriai mūsų. Ką jūs galvojate, kokios čia gerosios patirtis matytumėte iš savo tyrimų gal?
Tai reakcija nedidelė. Aš noriu, kadangi jau centralizacija nuskambėjo žodis, aš naujas išmokęs yra tokia savoka hierarchija ir yra savoka heterarchija. Reiškia mažų hierarchijų tinklas. Ir čia yra dilema, tarp kitko, jeigu kalbam apie atsparumą ir apie paslaugų kokybę. Paslaugų kokybė reiškia, kuo arčiau nuo paslaugos gavėjo sprendimo taškas, jeigu kyla kažkoks neaiškumas, tuo paslauga tikėtina bus geresnė. Nes tiesiog daug mažiau žingsnių, mažiau, nes kalbėjom mažiau sugedus telefoną. Tačiau mažos hierarchijos turi mažai resursų. Tarkim, jeigu krizė yra didelė, jeigu iššūkis yra didelis, galimai sistemai kelintis grėsmę. Covidas, migracijos krizė, netgi Alytaus gaisro nereikia pamiršti. Tai tada hierarchija turėtų veikti. Ir triukas yra toksai, reiškia, kaip turėti kažkokį režimą, kažkokį scenarijų, kaip persijungimo hierarchijos, kuri yra palanki rutino sąlygom visuomeniai prie hierarchijos, kaip jį mobilizuoja. Ir tam, aišku, galima daug įrankių pagalvoti. Tai pirmas dalykas, kuris mane turbūt džiugina, jeigu pažiūrėti tas krizės, kuriuo mes susidūrėm pastaruosius 5 metus. Iš tikrųjų, vėl, jeigu lyginti pasaulinę lygą olimpinių principų, tai galima rasti geriau. Bet iš tikrųjų mes nesam, Šiaurės Korėjos lygio. Tai tikrai esam aukščiausiai lygą ir atkrentamasias varžybas patenkam. Tai turbūt bendrai paėmus, tai tikrai galime rasti visokiausių ten teisinių barjerų, finansinių barjerų panašiai, tačiau kai jau, taip sakant,
barriers to dealing with our problems.
Į seną ir viskas ištiško. Tai mūsų sistema susitvarkė. Tai jinai turi tą bazinį atsparumą, turi bazinį solidarumą. Ir iš tikrųjų gal tik papildyti, mes dabar turim didžiulį kapitalą tiek iš COVID patirties tarp institucinės sąveikos, tiek dabar Ukrainos karas turi visuomenės pakilėjimo etapą, kurio galbūt net nematėm nuo sąjūdžio laikų. Tačiau tai yra toks greit gendantis produktas. Tai jeigu raumenų netreniruoji, jeigu visuomenė neparodai tokio iš viešo sektoriaus reveranso, kad čia svarbu, tai tas gali būti prarasta. Taip būtų galima į reikalą žiūrėti, kad ką galime padaryti, kad visuomenės potencialas būtų išnaudojamas. Tada mes rasim tą ekonominį efektyvumą.
Otherwise, we won't be able to achieve the sustainability, the level of sustainability that we're striking for. Thank you very much again for your sports parallels. Mr. Mayor, perhaps you would like to add something?
Kalbėdamasi su būsimais Ukrainos lyderiais čia prieš keletą metų, jaunaisiais Ukrainos parlamentarais,
when I met with the young Ukrainian parliamentarians, this was back in 2016, 2017,
išsiaiškinti priežastis, kodėl
mūsų
pažanga spartesnė nei jų.
As to why our progress is more rapid than theirs.
Priėjom išvados elementarios. Tiesiog mums pasisekė. Kad aukščiausioje taryboje mes turėjom aibę intelekto, aibę įvairios pusinės patirties ir nulį interesų. Vienintelį interesą turėjo visi atkurti mūsų šalį ir pastatyti ant tų pačių bėgių. Apmaudu, bet einam atgal, nuo tų bėgių riedam atgal ir tos kokybės mūsų parlamente šiandien yra ir apgailėtinos tame tarpe, kur tiesiog nesusipratimą mes turime parlamente. Tai aš kalbu ir apie lyderystę viešajame sektoriu, kas yra labai svarbu ir ypatingai neapibrėžtumo sąlygų. Tikras lyderis, gavęs suformuotas užduotis viešasias paslaugos ir jų kokybę pakelia per kelis mėnesius į neįtikėtiną lygį. Ir mūsų bendruomeniai pasisekė, kai mes prisėmėm ryžtingą sprendimą ir savo sveikatos sistemą pakeitėm, pakeisdami jos lyderius vadovus. Priimdami jaunus, ambicingus, talentingus vadovus, antrinės sveikatos lygį iš kritinės situacijos perkeliam į turbūt aukščiausią lygmenį, galima šiandien dienos sąlygomis ir paslaugų kokybė iš krypties pasiekiamumo krypties, komunikacinio pasiekiamumo krypties. Kai visoje Lietuvoje mes žinom, kaip veikia medicina, reikia turėti kam paskambinti. Reikia turėti, per ką ir kam paskambinti. Mes perkeliam į tą lygmenį, kai tiesiog komunikacinė prasme visos paslaugos pasiekiamos vienodai visiems. Ir tada atsiranda ir pasitikėjimas, ir aišku, svarbiausi uždaviniai patikimumas, kokybė ir
saugumas. Irgi sureaguosiu apie lyderius. Tai iš tikrųjų nuskambėjo vienas akcentas, kad turbūt tų lyderių mums reikia, bet į kokią aplinką mes juos leidžiam. Tai va čia irgi yra vienas iš tokių sunkumų kartais, kai tie lyderiai išeina paskui iš to viešo sektoriaus. Tai turbūt toks palinkėjimas būtų, kad mes vis dėlto sukurtumėm tas sąlygas, kur lyderiai turėtų galimybę veikti lankščiai, greitai, jais pasitikėtumėm ir turbūt vėlgi grįšiu prie to pačio, mes turėtumėm teisingai ir konkurencingai apmokėti. Tai čia formulė tokia, algoritmas labai paprastai ir čia matom, kad kartais jisai suveikia, bet tie sprendimai tada jau yra tokie originalesni ir kartais, visgi gebam tos lyderius pristraukti.
This reflects our ability to retain professional leaders in the sector. Well, as Mr. Mayor has already mentioned, we should educate proactive leaders since the very beginning. So then our leaders will have higher strategic, analytical skills.
puikiai vystosi diskusija. Na, trečias mūsų, ta trečioji dalis klausimas daugiau susijęs su rekomendacijomis viešajam sektoriui. Jūs jau kaip ir užbėgote įvykiams už akių, jūs jau pradėjote rekomenduoti, ko reikia ateičiai. Tas labai džiugu. Bet vis dėlto galbūt turite viešasis sektorius, siekiant jo tvarumo, siekiant jo ilgamžiškumo, jo, tą gerąją prasme. Gal turite kažkokiu, tai kokie tai žingsniai turėtų būti toliau? Ką reikėtų daryti? Konkrečios galbūt priemonės, jeigu įmanoma. Kiek įmanoma, žinoma, žiūrint į perspektyvą.
Man atrodo, meras gerai palėtė vieną keiksmažodį, tą centralizaciją. Tai galbūt vienas iš esmės ir galėtų būti pirminių sprendimų. Aš suprantu, efektyvumas labai svarbu, bet kada vien tik efektyvumas pradeda imti viršų, pinigai ar ne, žiūrim kiek pelno, perkeliami viešą sektorių, vien tik tai, sakykim, verslo dominuojančią prizmę, va čia ir kartais atsidaro problemos, ar ne? Tai galbūt kartais reikia pripažinti, kad kai kurios, nepripažinti, tarsi tai visi mes suprantam, bet pripažinti, kad kai kurie dalykai yra nuostolingi, bet jie yra privalomi ir reikalingi. Ir dėl to šito vietoj tą sugebėti rasti balansą. Ir tikrai, nes kiekvienas turbūt susidūrėme tikrai, ką reiškia centralizuotos paslaugos, ar tai būtų viešosios, ar tai būtų privačios, dabar irgi labai kompanijų, žinot, kai paskambini, kad ir privačios, turi neseną įvykį, kai 9 minutės lauki telefonė ar ne, kol su tavim kažkas susisieks, tai turbūt įspūdžių didelė nedaro. Tai tą balansą vis dėlto surasti tam pasiekimume ir tame aptarnavime, tai ir būtų vienas iš esminių raktų į sėkmingą, pavadinkim taip, ateities viešojo sektoriaus egzistenciją.
Public sector of the future. Thank you.
Mūsų šie pastarieji metai, kritinis laikotarpis išmokė daug naujų
The critical period of the recent years have taught us to do things in different ways, more effective ways and cheaper ways. I have said on numerous occasions that if we delegate certain functions, if we provide certain functions, they do not necessarily need to be established in the capital city of Lithuania, in Vilnius. For example, human resources management centers or financial accounting centers could be established in the periphery, in regions of Lithuania, and they will be able to provide services of equal quality.
Taip, centralizacija turbūt įdomu mūsų čia yra ta tema, kur mes diskutuojam vienas apie ekonomiškumą, bet iš tikrųjų centralizacija yra
Domas Griškevičius and me talk about, but we have to look at what we are going to decentralize and how we are going to do. My key point is that we have to trust our people. It's been mentioned on numerous occasions that we have very many state-minded public servants. Those people have demonstrated that they can do a lot. We simply have to trust them. We also have to trust leaders.
Turi suveikti ir atsakomybės principas, kaip algoritmas, pasitikiu, duodu, bet natūralu, kad iš tavęs pareikalauju.
Tai mandate the person with certain functions, but at the same time I require responsibility and accountability. So I hope that the Lithuanian Parliament will have political will to adopt the decisions that Lithuania has been waiting for 30 years. I believe that we have become mature for the reform of the public sector in order to make it more flexible and efficient. Thank you. I'll turn to researchers now. Well, I believe I'll only need to conclude. If society trusts in the authorities, and if authorities trust in their society, then I believe the problems can be solved. Now, how to address this? Many things have already been done. We do have an efficient state on many accounts. Of course, there is always room for improvement. And in my career, I've heard a lot of institutional patriotism, which means that, well, we expect people to stay in one, to work in one institution. But if we looked at the areas of responsibility of the ministry, the institutions, public institutions, are sometimes forced to establish certain conditions.
Siekiant sukurti vis tik tai vieningą viešąją tarnybą, kad tiek gydytojas, tiek civilis tarnautojas, tiek
it is important to have a common public servant system so that those people could move horizontally within the system, so that they could have similar guarantees and could be provided with similar benefits for their loyalty for the public sector. I believe that we need to find what can motivate our people to work. Let's say, we know that, let's say, people from the Netherlands are not very much motivated to work in the Frontex, while while Hungarians are very happy to work for the Frontex. So we need to find something that motivates our people. But we also have to ensure that those people understand that they serve primarily Lithuania rather than some people who are higher up in the hierarchy. Maybe centralization is not the answer to fragmentation in the public sector. Thank you. I believe that you have just provided us with a very justified argument and insight. Well, public service, public sector, transformation and reform of the public service were the key words in the public for quite a few years. But we also have to answer what relations between the nation state and the European Union, and I believe this could be a topic for, let's say, another conference. Thank you. I wonder whether there is anyone willing to respond. And if not, then I'll turn to the audience. And since we don't have questions in the Slido platform, we have a question from the audience. Thank you very much. I am a member of the Seimas. I have a question to the Norwegian representative. But I was listening to all the panelists. Well, it seems that you first create uncertainty and then you think what to do with that. As Domas Griškevičius said, that we are courageous when it comes to circumventing legal acts. Is it good or bad? Because no one speaks, no one says that laws and legislation have to be perfect. We do have to strive for perfection. You also said that the problems are deteriorating, but what are we doing to ensure that this does not happen? It seems to me that you have only stated the facts. The problems persist for many years now. You said that we have to develop competences, we have to allocate funding for trainings. But we still lack competences. Maybe the problem is that not everyone is able to learn all those skills. Now, the things that are offered now are only cosmetic means rather than some in-depth reforms. I do agree that we have to trust people, but we have to control people as well. Maybe there is no competence when it comes to controlling people. I wonder, maybe there is no trust in innovations. Maybe the people do not want innovations because they do not trust those innovations, because they have already been disappointed for many times. Well, it's not about participating only, followed by the Olympic principle. We should not only be participating, we should deliver results. Also, people said that they have no solutions to address the problems, but we have to think how to address the problems. Mr. Vitalis Gailius said that there is quite a lot of misunderstanding in the Lithuanian parliament. What are those misunderstandings? If you do not identify and talk about those misunderstandings out loud, we will not know how to address them. Lithuania is in avant-garde of what? In promoting war or in the search of peace? Are we going to promote the world become more violent, or will be the ones and be exceptional? Maybe we should not follow the examples that are not positive. So these are only my considerations. I don't know whether you can answer to my considerations, but I would be very happy. Well, thank you for the kind of summary. My dear colleagues, do you want to say anything? Well, I see that the colleagues agree with your remarks and do not have anything to add. Colleagues? Any other questions? Well, you have a question. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Robert Gawłowski. I'm from Polish University, so quite different perspective. Thank you for your contributions. I have two thoughts after your remarks. I wonder to what extent it's a question about lack of competence, but maybe need for new competences. I mean that we live in an overlapping crisis, hard to predict, so we have to constantly discover or rediscover and reinvent public administration. So maybe it's maybe a question of narrative, but it's not lack of competence, but constant need to rediscover competence that we need in certain circumstances. Maybe that's a better framework to think about this, because lack of competence may suggest that there is a problem inside, but these crises are caused by external factors. So it's hard to prepare for this kind of crisis when you don't know what to expect for. So maybe that's something I'm interested in. What do you think about this? And the second thought after your contribution is about risk, because you put it in sustainability and continuity. I wonder to what extent maybe it's sustainability and innovation. I mean that you need some openness for risks, acceptance for risks, awareness that now you are on a moving ground and you have to take a risk and say about it and be open and frank and say that we're trying our best, but at the end of the day it's new for us, for public sector, for private sector, for citizens, and we have to discuss what are these limitations of risks. So maybe it's not continuity, but openness for innovation, and try to balance these two things, sustainability and innovation, not continuity, because nothing would be like before. Thank you.
Ačiū gerbiam profesoriui Robert.
Thank you, Professor Robert. Could anyone respond to Professor? I will speak Lithuanian.
Tokia mintis dėl tos naujų kompetencijų klausimų.
When it comes to new competences, in the presentation of
kalbam vėl apie viešąjį sektorių
Ilona,
ir skaičiuojam galvas, kiek ten tų
if we're looking
yra, tai iš
at
tikrųjų
the
nebūtų
public
pati
sector,
didžiausia
if we
pasaulio kompanija.
calculating how many public servants we have, we would probably see that this figure is not the biggest in comparison to the rest of countries in the world. I believe that talent management is very important, and developing competence models. You define the general competences that are needed for our public servants. You map those competences, and then you probably would see that you have very many people with exceptional competences, that they are working in an absolutely different place. For example, the CEO of one company does not know that there's a specialist across the street is well placed to carry out, let's say, public procurement, or to, let's say, write certain program for him. So,
intensyviau naudojama išskirtinė kompetencija mūsų viešajam sektoriui esančių tarnautojų.
We could more intensively use the competences of our public services servants. So we should develop a competence management model. The tools are already commercially available, so this would not be a big deal. So I believe that would be a very nice initiative. I also see that Mr. Vitalis and Sigitas also have questions. Thank you, Professor, for bringing us some food for thought. I know that the Ministry of the Interior has the Public Service Department in its disposition, and I believe that this department can also host a register for specialists with some exceptional competences that, let's say, public servants have, so that, let's say, ministries or public institutions can resort to the list of exceptional competences, to the register of those exceptional competences whenever they need. A very good idea indeed, but let me draw your attention to the fact that the work is already underway and that the competence model is being updated currently. We also have to look at what competences are needed, because we believe that we should not be guided by the competence model of 2013, living in the year 2022 or 2023. So we will soon have a competence model, a new competence model, which will be applied in recruiting people for the public servants. This is the objective that is being implemented by the Ministry of the Interior of the Republic of Lithuania. The draft law has been already submitted for the Lithuanian Parliament. Now, when it comes to exceptional competences, we first and foremost see that we need to have CEOs with exceptional competences and to ensure that we do not lose them. So we have to make sure that we have those exceptional competences and that we can make use of the competences in one or another area of public sector. So as I have mentioned, the work is underway. I hope that we will not lose the momentum, and again I'll bring here the same example of the railway, and I hope that the best practices will be used in the public sector. Thank you. May I talk on this issue? Well, yes, but only a few minutes only. I'll speak Lithuanian to be faster. In our presentation, questions, we did not say that there are no competences. We have competences, but the competences do not match the needs of the year 2022 or the year 2023. I cannot say, well, I'm not sure, 100% sure, that the situation will be different in 1 year's time, and this goes back to what you've said. Nothing is changing. Now, within the scope of our survey, there are certain methodologies that we are proposing, and these methodologies do not require for some centralized decisions, because the leadership in the strategic level can identify the competencies that they need themselves. It is possible, it is doable, and this could be done within each and every organization. So we simply have to identify to see whether there are some exceptional competencies. Unfortunately, our leaders of the companies fail to ask where the employees whether they have such competencies, while workers lack motivation to say that they have one or another exceptional company. So first we have to start working within our own companies because the tools are in place. Now, if we have to answer the question as to what could be done, so I believe that the academic community is perfectly situated to taking the steps forward. We can cooperate and communicate with the public sector, and we can be the ones to ensure the breakthrough not only at the national level in preparing various methodologies. So we are not speaking about the lack of competences. We are talking about the search for exceptional competences within our organization. Mr. Paulius Skardžius from the Ministry of the Interior, you also wanted to raise a question. Well, Mantas Bileišis talked about horizontal cooperation, but let me stress that we also have to talk about vertical cooperation, about the strengthening of multi-layered governance. Thank you. Thank you very much. We talked about challenges. We tried to look at the trends of best practices and the recommendations. So let me thank the panelists and give them a round of applause. Thank you very much indeed. I'm also very grateful for your active participation. Let me remind you that the conference is not over. We are going to have a half-an-hour break, and there's a canteen, a cafeteria nearby, and we are meeting back for the panel A, while the two other panels will be held in the other rooms. So thank you, and see you after the coffee break.